I just was like, that's not my focus. It's not my interest right now. And life happens, work happens, you have children, things happen, you end up moving. I ended up moving overseas for a few years. Ended up doing some other training. Kind of got away from formal karate training for a few years, but then was on a work trip and had been starting to feel the bug again. And I was like, you know what, I need to do something. So it was actually my former teammate John, who was like, you need to, when you get back, when you get back off this work trip, and it was a long-term trip, you need to go to, there's this Shitokai dojo that's not too far from where you're at. And so I was like, okay, yeah, but I'm on this work trip, and I go outside one day, and I see this like 6-7 foot PVC pipe. It's real thin, nothing too crazy. But I pick it up and I start, swinging my bow again, right? And I'm outside, and one of the other guys on my team walks outside, and he looks at me and he stops, and then he just shakes his head, and he keeps walking. And I would move, I'd go in the conference room and I'd move tables aside, and I would find a place to start working on kata again and start refreshing my kata. So I ended up going back and going to this dojo that my friend recommended. There were other Shoden-ryu schools in the area that were much closer to my house. But when I looked at them, like, this is not what Sensei was teaching, right? It's a little bit different. They're not going to be doing the same things that Oshido Sensei was teaching. So I'm like, well, my friend recommended over here, I'll go check this out. And I was like, I need a place to train and whatnot. So I went there, and it was a USA Shitokai, part of the USA branch of the JKF Shitokai. And I started competing again, not so much kind of as just as a test to myself, right? Just to kind of push myself and go out there and do something. And I met Jonathan. I actually, he jokes about, he kind of teases me. I don't remember meeting him that day. He says we met, but he said I ignored him when I was talking to this other sensei that we both know. So I apologize, Jonathan, again. But then a couple months later, we met at a tournament, again, closer to where he lives, actually. And we started talking. And I actually asked him to film. I'm like, hey, Sensei, excuse me, can you film? I'm about to go up here. Can you record my kata for me, please? And then we started talking. And then at the next tournament, we were like, hey, I never, we started talking again. And I'm going to go off on a little sidetrack, but that's what I love about karate is obviously the technical, you learn technique, you learn martial arts, but we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. It's very unlikely that we would be having this conversation if I hadn't gone to a tournament and met this guy who was from Pennsylvania, who then I met his sensei, and then you met his sensei because you grew up in that same place. And now here we are in Okinawa, meeting in Okinawa the first time, drinking Orion beer at the dojo bar, all because of karate. Right. And so, there's friends that I've had for years. There's people that I've been in contact. My senpai from my Nagoya Gakuin Karate-bu, who I still message with. I'm friends with on Facebook. We talk. We went, last time I was in Nagoya, we went and we met at my friend's work at 10 o'clock at night. We're pushing desks out of the way, and we're doing this training, and then we're going to have sushi after dinner in the middle of the night, all because of karate. And so it's just amazing the relationships that you can build because of that. So I started competing again, just, going out, doing a couple kata. And when I was at this dojo, so it's kind of how Apex started and what this is, and I'll explain where all this comes from and how all this formed. And then I'll talk about how it relates to my feelings about competition and how we interact with that. But one of the junior athletes, when he found out that I had been on the national team, he'd wanted to try for, elite competition and trying to get on the junior national team or the senior national team. And so he asked me to start working with him, kind of coaching a little bit on the side. And so, we worked it out, and we would meet, once a week, like on Sundays usually, and we would go over some competition kata and things like that. And I had it just kind of started. And so he started doing well in local tournaments and going up to New York. And then Jonathan and I started talking, and uh, Jonathan calls me one day and he's like, hey, Sensei, I've got two young students, two girls who want to try for the junior national team, but I'm a kumite athlete. I'm not a kata guy. Can you help? I'm like, yeah, sure. I can come down and we can see what we can do. And so I started working with a couple of Jonathan's athletes. And then I made friends with somebody else in New York who, at a tournament again, the first time we met was at the New York International Open. I'd seen him in a couple of tournaments, but we started talking, and it was like, hey, what do you're not the typical athlete that we see out here. What he's like, well, I just kind of want to compete and challenge myself. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we should start working together. So over time, and he's a Goju-ryu person also. So over time, this small group of us started to kind of get together of different styles. We have somebody, and then I ended up getting another student who was Shorinryu, but who wanted to compete. We have athletes now from several different styles in several different states, and that's kind of how it started. I was talking with Jonathan. It was even the first night. I was like, this work that I'm doing with some of our junior athletes, maybe I can turn this into like an online thing or a coaching thing, to where regardless of what style you do, if you want to do competition, maybe here's some tips and some pointers, kind of like coaching, just, coaching for competition, regardless of what style or anything like that. And Jonathan and I, the first night, after we kicked the girls loose, we ended up talking in the dojo for 3 hours, I think, just talking about different things and going through some different things. And, not really even, talking about Kobudo or anything like that, just kind of about competition. And that kind of started the nucleus of what ended up being Apex Karate Performance. And so Apex has two parts. There's the team, which, as I said, we have people in Virginia, we have people in Maryland, we have people in New York, we have an athlete in France, and we have an athlete in Osaka, and me in China.
Quite international.
Right?
Now, the one person that you described started to just ask you questions at the tournaments when he found out that you were previously on the national team. But then the other students, or the other teammates, did you go out and recruit them? Did they come to you? How did this happen?
So it was kind of a combination. So one of the junior athletes, he was from the dojo that I was going to at the time. And he's like, just, can you help me with my competition stuff a little bit? So we started working with him. And then our athlete who's in France was research exchange in the US. And we kind of met. He was a Shoryu kid in France, had been competed at French nationals, always got beat out by the Shotokan in France. Shotokan is kind of strong there. And so he started coming to our Sunday mornings training, and it kind of just developed from there. I had these two people that I was working with. Jonathan asked me to start working with his two girls. This other person from New York that I started working with was like, well, maybe, I'm kind of doing this work over here. Maybe I can help you out a little bit too. And he would come down once in a while, and we would talk, and we would do some training. And then I kind of got into, well, this work that I'm doing over here by trial and error with this one kid, let's kind of systemize that, and let's turn that into a way of taking somebody from wherever they're at and trying to maximize their performance. And that was kind of the impetus for Apex. And that's why I call it Apex, because you're trying to maximize your performance, right? We're trying to reach that peak. But at the flip side, it's always an ongoing thing. There's no such thing in karate. There's no such thing as mastery, right? I actually don't like that term when they say master so-and-so or grandmaster so-and-so, because in the Japanese way of thinking, there is no mastery, right? There's no, you never master karate. You just progress, and you keep learning. You're trying to keep progressing. And so that's kind of where I got the name from. But my philosophy with that is we are going to do what I call essentially good karate. We're going to do competition, and we're going to take the things that I learned from Oshiro Sensei, that I learned from other places, in ways that we can move better, move faster, become more efficient, become more biomechanically correct, do good karate, and win.
Good.
So
Good.
No,
Good. That's
no
great.
foot, no foot stomping, no gi slapping, no extra body movement just because, no exaggerated faces, right? To play acting, those are some of the things that we minimize, right? I take the skills, the things that I learned from Kobudo or Oshiro Sensei's karate or from other places that I picked up, and I look at somebody's kata and say, can we move more efficiently? Can we move faster? Can we make the judge go, I'm not sure exactly what just happened, but that was fast. And so that's my overriding philosophy of Apex Karate Performance is we want to maximize your performance by doing good karate.
And your teammates right now are your students are competing at international tournaments, mostly in the U.S. tournaments. Where are they? Japan.
Right now, I have one athlete in Japan who's kind of taking a break for competition because of he's in a work training program. But I have one athlete that was trying out for the French national team. I have one athlete who's on the junior U.S. national team for under 21 kata. And I have one athlete who's on the senior national team for team kata. Now, we don't know what's going to happen because the the Pan American Championships got canceled. I just saw something today that we may hear tomorrow that the WKF World Championships that was supposed to be in Dubai in October is probably going to get pushed until next year. So, but competing nationally, they've 3 of our athletes have competed at Series A tournaments. Jonathan's been competing at Series A Series A events, WKF Series A events for the last 3 years, I think. We haven't heard what's going to happen with the USA Nationals right now, but it's looking like it's probably going to get postponed.
Your focus for your athletes right now is just on kata, or also, because Jonathan's a kumite guy, are you also doing kumite?
I do not do kumite. I leave that to Jonathan. The athletes, so one of Jonathan's girls has kind of switched to kumite, but the rest of us are predominantly kata athletes.
So this is very international. Like you said
Yes.
a moment ago, you're in China. You've got a athlete in Japan, in France, and then a couple in different parts of America. Jonathan's in Virginia. So this is, if you can't be there together, which right now many people can't be together because of the pandemic, but that didn't matter to you guys because you were remote anyway. So describe how is the coaching conducted?
So even before this, we would frequently we would just get on FaceTime and do remote coaching. I would talk to them. I would watch their kata. So if I was going to take a new athlete I'd never trained with or never worked together with in person, I think it would be very difficult because I use a lot of analogies and things. I talk about biomechanics, how to use the body. Move your shoulder here, use this muscle, or this is how you want to do this. And so, or use your knees differently, release your knees. And without being able to do it, so in person first, I think it would be very difficult. But all of my athletes, we've trained together in person so that when I describe something, they know what I'm talking about. And for them, one of the keys is not just building up the awareness of themselves. The self-awareness is key to karate development, regardless of whether you're talking about competition or not. You have to understand how your body works and what your body is actually doing when you're doing a technique or when you're doing a kata. And you won't be able to make that change until you're actually aware and cognizant of what your body is actually doing. And I'll give you an example. The other day, I recorded some of my kata, and they felt okay when I was doing them. But then I sat and watched the videos afterwards, and I watched the last one first, and I saw myself doing something in there. I'm like, well, that's not right. And then I watched every single one, and I recorded it like 6 or 7 times, and I did the same mistake in each time. I'm like, okay, well, that's not acceptable, right? And I have to be, why was I doing what I was doing? Why was I moving the way I was moving? And it's nothing major. I just didn't like the way I was moving my hands because I wasn't aware of what my hands were doing when I was moving my body. I was so focused on moving my body that I had neglected to focus on moving my hands the way I wanted to move my hands also. So then I had to go back and break down the movement and rep that out and then put that back in my kata and be like, okay, I'm aware of what I'm doing now and I need to fix that. So that's one of the things that I talk about with my athletes is the awareness of yourself and what you're physically doing so that you can make improvements. Because if they're just going through the kata and they're just doing the move without being aware of what they're doing, no matter what I say to them in person or over Zoom or FaceTime, they're not going to be able to make that adjustment. And so we spend a lot of time trying to get them to focus on, how their shoulders moving, what their arm is doing, what their knees are doing, how to move their back muscles, how to move, if they're doing a block and their armpit's open, their elbow is out, how that impacts what they're doing and why it would no longer be a valid technique. Because some of it, whether you're there in person or over Zoom or online, we do supad impe, and when they stick their hands out, I can tell whether they're just sticking their hands out to stick their hands out or whether they're focused on the movement of what they would be doing, not necessarily visualizing the bunkai or visualizing an opponent, but an awareness of actually doing the technique versus just sticking their hands out. And you can, and I can see that through, it was like, okay, stop, do that again. You need to focus on what you're doing there, because I can tell by watching your eyes, and your eyes are moving while you're doing the kata, and you're just going through the motions now rather than being aware of what you're actually doing.
The athletes that you teach, are they already a member of another dojo at their hometown?
So most of them are, yes. They are, Jonathan has his dojo, his Okinawan Goju-ryu, Shobukan. The athletes up in New York are part of a different Goju-ryu. There are a couple that are in a Shoryu school in Maryland, and then I have one athlete who trains on his own. My student who is a Shorin-ryu, who's he's the one that I would say is like my direct student, right? He came, we met up, and like, okay, and then he's, we do kobudo together, we do sai, we work the bow, and everything like that. So, but then my athlete in France is kind of independent right now. He's kind of training on his own. And my athlete in Japan is in transition. He actually came to China and we trained together. We met again at a tournament, right? In Portland, Oregon, actually. I flew from the East Coast to a tournament in Portland, Oregon, the Yoshida Cup. And he had flown from Japan with a group there. We'd kind of kept in contact, but then one day he's like, I'm going to come to China and train with you. So he came and we trained for 3 days here after I arrived. So yeah, we're kind of but that's the part about Apex that I really like, is it's not Yuha or style specific. It's not dojo specific. And so that's where, my YouTube channel and my online stuff that I'm going to be putting out more content is not style specific, and that's where our team, that kind of the team Apex, the competitive team itself, developed wasn't the initial intent. It just that's how it kind of just developed over time. All these people we all kind of just gravitated together and became this team. Again, one of the great things about karate is that, that was never the intent. That's just kind of the result as it happened. But the best part of it is that it's not, well, we're part of whatever organization or whatever, Goju-ryu style or Shoryu or whatever. It's like, okay, you can, the only one, I don't do very good Shotokan kata, so I may not be, the things I say may not mesh well with Shotokan, but if somebody wanted to come and train with us, I'd be more than happy, right? I did a seminar in Maryland and we had a Shotokan person come and he was like, well, that's like, I never thought of it like that. I never thought of moving my body that way. On one hand, I sit and I watch competition videos and I see what people are doing and I see like how can I make our athletes better, right? I sit there and I watch what athletes are doing, and but I have some definitive rules, like what I don't want my athletes to do. And as the Olympics were postponed now, but this year was supposed to be the Olympics. Within the last year, I've seen athletes who I really respected just change kata, just arbitrarily make changes to kata. I'm like, well, what was that? And that's one thing that we absolutely will not do. It's like we will do kata and we will do it well. And some of the athletes, and what I really appreciate are some of the athletes. For example, like one of the U.S. national team members, Gakuji Tozaki, who's number 1 in the U.S. right now. He's been doing some of Oshiro Sensei's kata in competition. Kano Chinto, he did that in the bronze medal match against Damien Quintero at the Premier League in Salzburg in March. He was the first one to go out and do the Shorinryu Chatanyara Kushanku in competition. If not one of the first ones, but one of the first ones maybe to do it in Premier League or WKF competition. And so you're starting to see some of those. And that's what, one of my athletes does, for example, Chatanyara, and he does Matsumura Basai. He does mostly the Shitoryu way, but with better movement, let's say, or different movement, different footwork and things like that. So we're trying to put that in and see if we can try and influence good karate into competition and see how successful we are.
So what was your overall take, even though the Olympics were postponed, what was your overall take on karate being brought into the Olympics? Were you happy about that? Concerned? Didn't care? One way or the other?
So on one hand, I think it's amazing, right? That karate was finally able, that Japan was kind of able to get karate in the Olympics. I think that, I did a video on this, right? You may have seen. Overall, I think it's a positive. However, it needs to be cautionary, right? I just referenced how within the past year, even some very skilled athletes have just arbitrarily changed kata. And I think it can bring a great awareness of karate and I think it can bring people into the dojo. The key, though, and the necessity is that people on both sides of the competition / non-competition aspect just need to be honest with people coming into the dojo. People may be coming looking for that competition aspect, and if that's your bread and butter, and there are dojos that are all about WKF style competition, and that's phenomenal, right? I have a competition team that competes in WKF competition. It's great. I think competition itself brings a level of athleticism and dynamics to karate that is oftentimes lacking. I think it also just needs to be, everybody needs to be upfront with it. If somebody comes to your dojo and they want to learn self-defense, or they want to just learn karate as a martial art because it's related to Japan or Okinawa, and they want to learn the cultural aspects of it, and you're teaching WKF style kumite, that may not be the path that they're looking for. Or if they want that, but that's not your focus, send them somewhere else. Send them to the place. And so that requires a level of communication back and forth between both the student and the dojo owner as to what the person is looking for in karate, what they're trying to achieve, and whether your dojo is the right place for that. Everybody needs a fit, and everybody needs to find the place. And there are places that do all of that. And some places have a good balance. Hey, on Friday night, we're going to do competition kumite. Monday through Thursday, if that's not your tea, that's not your cup of tea, well, Tuesday night we do kobudo, and Monday is kata night, or whatever it is. And some places can find that balance very well. But I think overall, the level of athleticism and performance that competition brings to karate, I think, is one of the key points, or one of the points that's a definite bonus. One thing that I think we might have talked about it, I know like Jonathan and I have talked about it a lot, is you see people do karate and a 20-year-old person or a 25 or a 30-year-old person moves like they're 65. You know, you're familiar with the Okinawa Karate Masters series.
Yeah, yeah, great series. Yep, Chris Wilson's
And
master.
Chris Wilson series, right? And the most recent one was Sakamoto Sensei, right? And one thing that I was really struck by during his interview was how he talked about people want to protect karate. Like, there are people on the island who are going to protect karate, and they are going to keep it exactly like they were taught, or the way they learned from their sensei, or their sensei learned from his sensei. And Sakamoto Sensei talked about, you know, the contrast between protecting and improving or advancing or progress of karate. And I think you can do both. You know, I look at people doing some styles or whatever, and I see the founder of the style or the chief of the organization moving, and then I see a person who's in their 20s or 25, and they're moving exactly like that person because they're imitating that person. That's not protecting that person. You know, I had a conversation, or I'm sorry, that's not protecting that karate. That's simply just putting it in a stasis, and it's not any type of progression. You know, and I'll give you an example. One technique that I'm very critical of is maigeri. And maybe this is one of my pet peeves of techniques, and, you know, maybe it's from that initial Taekwondo experience or whatnot, but the maigeri is a phenomenal technique. It's one of the best techniques that we have in karate. But I will see people do a front kick, and then they will drop their foot on the ground, just like what somebody who is 75 would do when they kick. Or just like some of these videos of some of the people from, you know, the 40s or the 50s, and you see they're moving that way. Well, that's how so-and-so did it, so that's how I'm going to do it. Okay. But what competition has shown us is, let's even compare competition with competition. If you go back and you look at Sakamoto Sensei, 3-time world champion, Wakai Atsuko, 4-time world champion, you know, Abe Ryoki, world champion, any of these, you know, Michael Malone from France, I think 2 or 3-time kata world champion. Would they win the world championships today? Probably not, because over time, competition karate, competitive karate has become professionalized. It's become a professional sport. We have better nutrition. We understand nutrition better. We understand recovery. We understand physical training on how to maximize our performance in competition by bettering our athleticism. And so that's one of the benefits of karate in competition. But when we step outside, a lot of people who, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people who are not in a competitive, oh, that's competition, we don't need to do it that way. I'm going to do it just like my sensei said, and or the way he showed it, and there's no progression, there's no advancement. A 25 or a 30 or a 40-year-old person should not be doing a maigeri like a 75 or an 80-year-old person. You should still have, now, granted, people get injured, they have knee injuries, they have foot injuries, and all those things are absolutely understandable. But maybe that's your sensei kicked that way because he had a knee injury or a hip injury. And that's why they're doing the technique that way. They don't want you to be kicking that way or doing the technique that way.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, and along with the progression too, we've learned how to prevent those injuries, right?
Yes. And that's what I call progression, right? That's how I like to talk about it. How I like to think about it is we need to be pushing our arts forward.
Yep. But I think that the benefit of that for you, for the person that you train under now, and what your focus is, you know, being a national team athlete and then training athletes now, you have to constantly progress.
Well, and that's kind of the great thing about, you know, I think we talked about this briefly, is competition is in many ways a barrier breaker. It blurs that line between what we traditionally consider styles into how do I make myself faster? How do I make myself do this technique better? And that's kind of where I think what kind of riding that train, if you will, is where was the idea of Apex. Regardless of style, let's try to increase our performance. How can we be better? How can we be faster? And things like that.
So I was going to ask you a question about Team Apex. How does someone become a member? If you've got someone that's going to be watching this video right now, you've got these athletes that are just dying to get out there after this pandemic releases us all from our home jail, and they're going to say, Michael Sensei, I am your next star athlete. What do they have to do?
Well, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. We've got an Instagram page. We've got a Facebook page. I got a YouTube channel where I'm putting out content.
I really liked your Thursday thoughts.
Yeah. And there's more coming.
5-minute, conversations, Sensei Michael's thoughts on a Thursday. They cover a variety of topics, and I think they're really good. You should keep going with that. And then the short videos on training at home is important as well, especially in the time that we're in right now. But what I've seen you doing on your YouTube channel, especially with the training at home things, are just about anybody can do them in a confined, maybe I shouldn't say confined, we're not in jail, in a smaller area here, and with minimal weight training equipment or minimal equipment is needed.
Well, and that's my goal with that, especially because even the way of training for competition has impacted the way I train myself. People will do kata, and people will think that if I just do my kata over and over again, that my kata will get better. And you will get better at doing what you are doing. But that doesn't mean that your kata will get better. And so even with those videos is you don't need to do kata. Yes, you at some point you need to put them all back together, but you can take it apart. And so my goal with those is to show an example of, here, just break your kata, free your mind, something I say all my athletes have heard me, quote the great Master Morpheus, and, break free of the way you've always done it and try something a little bit different and see how it improves your performance or your ability to train in this environment here. You don't have to do the kata. You can just do the first 2 moves over and over again in this one area. Then you switch to the other side and do it in your hallway or your bathroom, or, you could literally do kata in your bathroom, right? Maybe you shouldn't do kata in your bathroom, but
it's not Thursday, but it's Monday. Do you have any closing Monday thoughts for the Okinawa Karate Podcast viewers and listeners coming straight
Absolutely.
From Apex Karate Performance?
So we're all in tough times right now, but you got to keep training hard, go out there, do your thing, get after it, and we'll see you out there.
Absolutely. I echo those words. Keep training, keep training, keep training. Support your sensei, support your sensei, support your sensei as much as you possibly can. Looks like the world's starting to open back up. Please support your sensei in your dojo. As always, thank you for tuning in to the Okinawa Karate Podcast. I am Josh Simmers, coming to you from the birthplace of karate, Okinawa, Japan.